I'm going to do 3 dishes today. One's a tomato basil soup, and I purposely bought the ripest tomatoes they had at the store today, which usually you don't do because they're usually sort of squishy. I'm also going to do a red snapper, and it's got a really good marinade you guys can do with any fish, but I'm also going to do like an Asian vegetables on the side with that, and some jasmine rice with pineapple. And then for the last dish, I'm going to do a spaghetti squash, almost like a spaghetti dish, like a pasta dish with chicken and asparagus. So if you're looking for a low-carb dish, it's a pretty good one. Excuse me. Show you guys a little trick I do with my garlic. Garlic paper around the house just drives me nuts. So it's always sticking on my hands and stuff, and it's hard to clean up. So I usually crush my bulb inside of a bag. And if you keep pushing, you can actually, especially when you turn the garlic bulbs, the concave part down, you can actually crush them. And when you get to the point of peeling it, it just comes right off. And I'll usually finish peeling it while it's in the bag, but I'll take the piece out so you guys can see how it just comes right off. It's just not really a big hassle. So it's a good way, and then the garlic you don't use, you can just throw in the fridge in its bag, and it's ready to go next time you need it. I'm going to use quite a bit of garlic in this, and I'm going to use a lot of basil, and I'm going to use a soup base, a soup starter, I guess is the best way to call it, that I use in almost all my soups. And get that going. I'm also going to blanch tomatoes. Blanching tomatoes is, you do this so you can get the skin off really easily. And I'm going to take the skin off and the seeds so we have a smoother soup. And what you want to do is just a little X on your tomatoes. You could use, the canned tomatoes, by all means. But it wouldn't be much of a show if we did that, huh? I could use canned tomato soup. Okay. If you guys have any questions, by all means ask. I'll at least pretend to know what I'm saying when I talk. Yeah, I'll just throw the whole bag in the fridge.
How long
Yeah.
will it keep in the fridge?
A week or 2. Yeah, no problem.
And why do you need to cut the tomatoes?
Well, we're blanching this. We're going to put this into an ice bath. And this is where we're starting. Yeah, this will start our tomato. So I'll put a little oil in here. And pretty much, with the exception of the sour cream, which I'm going to use it as a garnish, if you don't put anything else but the oil, we're pretty low calorie because we're using tomatoes and chicken base and onions and stuff like that. So this is actually a pretty low calorie dish, and if you like the fat-free sour cream, by all means use it, or don't use any sour cream at all. But it seems to it's a nice contrast at the end. Just have a little bit of water in there. For my soup base, I almost always do onions, always do garlic, and usually Italian seasoning. But since today I'm using basil as my major flavor, I'm going to use a ton of fresh basil and just use some thyme and some oregano. I think that's what I grabbed. Rosemary, thyme. Okay. And these spices are actually from a local company called Al Dente's, and even we're gonna actually be the exclusive carrier for retail, and they'll be in the shop in the next week or so. But especially the ground spices and herbs that he has, he grinds it when you call him. So if I took a thing of the curry from back there or anything like that, you smell it, you're like, wow, it's just great stuff. And there's a huge markup in the spice business, and we intend on giving a lot more quality and product for the price. That's one way you can get your garlic started, just smashing it. And when you're slicing like this, it's always a good idea to keep your fingers like that. And, you get to keep your fingers. Yeah. Well, it's funny. I do cut myself, but it's almost never with a knife. It's always with like the lid of a can or something like that. It's usually my right hand that I cut because that's the hand you're using. Of course, I'll probably cut myself in the show today now that I said that. And onions. We're gonna run this through a hand blender, so you might want to go with a smaller dice. It'll make it easier to blend everything. Turn that down a little bit, getting hot. I usually don't do the cross cut on an onion because onions already have layers and you don't really need to do it. And this knife needs to be sharper. It'd make my job easier. Now it's a little hot, so as a fire extinguisher or heat extinguisher, I'll put the wine in now just to cool it down a little bit. I don't want to burn anything. Sorry? Red French table wine. Yeah, that's a nice expression for cheap wine. But it's drinkable. You don't want to use wine that you wouldn't drink. As Martha, or not Martha, it was Julie Childs always said. And the reason you don't cook with a wine you wouldn't drink is because if it doesn't taste that good, there's something in there, maybe it's bitter or whatever, and you reduce the wine, it concentrates those flavors. So you're actually intensifying the bad flavors in the wine. What I usually do, especially if it's like red wine, I usually will use it within a day or two, so before it even starts to turn. In 2 days, wine changes its flavor from not drinkable, but still use it for cooking. But let's say you're going on vacation for 2 weeks, put a cork on it, throw it in the fridge. That'll pretty much stop it from aging and changing its flavor. Or you can always start your own vinegar. Take some vinegar and just keep adding wine to the vinegar, and you make your own red wine vinegar. It's a good. What's that? Well, you can use some vinegar to start it. Vinegar is, if it's red wine vinegar, is bad wine. Wine that's gone, it's actually turned to vinegar. Yeah. Which is what happens sometimes even with a cork on it. That's why when you're in a restaurant, they always let you try the wine because sometimes it does turn to vinegar. Never had it happen personally. I know my dad did. Literally, they poured him. It was a real expensive restaurant, a very expensive bottle of wine, and the nice part about that is then they take you to the wine cellar and they buy you any bottle of wine you want. After assaulting your palate like that, yeah. Okay. Switch over here. Just throw these in an ice bath. And it's going to do two things. It'll make it real easy to peel and also cool down the tomatoes so we can handle them. And then we'll sit for another minute. I'm sorry? You'll see the peel will start to come back real easily. So, like that. It's just a few minutes. It really doesn't take long. In the restaurant business, we blanch vegetables all the time because that way we have total control over them. So say we blanch our broccoli, put an ice bath, blanch, you know, the vegetables. So then when you're ready and you're on the line, you just do a little bit of clarified butter. Your vegetables are already cooked, and the color's there, salt, white pepper, bang, and they're out. So it's also for control where we blanch vegetables. Stops the cooking, but it keeps the color and the crunchiness and that kind of stuff. So in here I got red wine, garlic, some thyme, what I use, thyme, oregano, thyme, rosemary, good stuff. Turn that down a little bit. And in French cookery, what we're making is concussé, which is just the meat of the tomato without the skin and without the seeds. And if you don't care, you know, you don't have to take this extra step by any means. It's tomato police will not knock on your door. You really just use your fingers and get the seeds out. They personally don't bug me at all, but I thought I'd show you more of the classical side of this. Turn the heat back up. And if you wanted to make this a creamy soup, you could, you know, add some cream at the end if you want a nice creamy tomato basil. I was sort of going for a lighter soup on this. Especially being summertime, tend to stay away from the richer foods. This soup starter you can use for almost any soup. It really is a great way to. Everybody likes my soups, and I do just about the same thing every time in the beginning. So. After here, it's what you put in it makes it, you know, asparagus or zucchini or anything else you want to put in there. And one of the things that happens when the wine cooks off is you start to caramelize the onions. And what in essence that means is the natural sugars that are in the onions start to brown, and that adds a really great flavor. That's why we always deglaze pans, you know, just get that stuff that's stuck to the bottom of the pan out of there, whether it be meat drippings or vegetables. This one came off real nice. I wouldn't use tomatoes that weren't almost about to go. And the reason why is the flavor is just going to be that much more intense in a tomato that's had a chance to ripen. And most of the tomatoes they have now are hybrids, and they're designed to handle shipping, so they wouldn't bruise, and they look nice. They don't taste like I remember my dad's tomatoes out of the garden tasting. And if any of you guys bought a hand blender on TV, I'm going to show you what you can do with it. I met so many people who bought those things, and I don't know, there must have been a good commercial. I don't know what the hell to do with it now. My black fingers from hitting a ceiling fan. I was going to go for a swim. My friend had a low-hanging ceiling fan, and I took it off my shirt and went whack on the ceiling. So I usually get asked what I did to my fingers, so I'll just tell you. And since we got the hot water there, I'm just going to use that to get the soup going. Doesn't have anything bad in it. As long as you wash your tomatoes before you throw them in there. Be down here. I actually burn these things out. I use them all the time. That's a good idea to turn off the stove when you're doing it. It's a little hot. It'll save you some time if you do this. I mean, you can let it cook and let the tomatoes cook down, but if you want to make your soup pretty fast, do it now, and that way the tomatoes have a little bit more time to cook, or they'll cook faster because the heat doesn't have to go through and break down as much. You can do this in a blender, but you gotta realize once you put it in a blender, all that heat will almost explode. So usually the center cap we leave off and just put a towel over it, because I've had it happen to me. It's not fun. Might do a little more at the end. Just get out any big chunks, but we'll get that cooking. I always tell people I use a lot of chicken bouillon, and when I use it like my salt. And the reason I do that is because it has both the richness of the chicken base, and it also has salt. So if you use it as your salt, you'll find you get a pretty nice balanced soup. If you use the canned tomatoes, the one thing most canned tomatoes have in is citric acid, which is an acid. It's sour, so you might want to counter it with a little bit of sugar or a little bit of honey. I'm just taking a wild guess here what this needs. It's too wild. The nice thing about a soup, it doesn't take very long to make. I mean, if you want, sometimes you make a soup, it's almost like a stew. Then you want to cook and cook and cook it. But a soup like this, it really just doesn't need that much time. You can. It won't. Well, tomato might change it. And this is definitely a soup that you want to use fresh basil. Lots of fresh basil. Fresh basil has a tendency to turn brown almost within minutes of cutting it. So it's worthwhile just to leave that to the last minute thing you want to do. I'm going to run in the back and grab a soup bowl. This is called chevnade, and you just grab all the leaves together and do nice thin slices. And it's more important if you're going to put it on a dish. I'm still going to run the puree there, so it's even going to probably cut it up just a little bit more than this. If you're in the Asian supermarkets, they have the Asian basil. Wow, that's great stuff. It's like 4 times as powerful. Oh, beautiful stuff. Yeah. And gotta have black pepper in here. And get another zap with the hand blender. And if you feel like really going classically, you can put it through what's called a chinois or a strainer if you really don't want any lumps. But that's more of a country cook chef than a real classic. Excuse me, I'm gonna have to grab a soup bowl. I may have to go back. Yep. Hit all the soup bowls. Do you know where they are? I'm out of cabinets. How embarrassing. Huh. Well, yeah, well, it's I have some really nice bowls. I just don't know where they are. Do you see a bowl back there, Faith? Is it bad today? Well, you know, if you, I think it's worthwhile spending the money on nice bowls, nice plates, because it really adds to the presentation of your dish. And what you want to do when you're serving the soup is go for the center of your bowl. Just make sure your ladle isn't too full. And if you want to thicken this, if you want a real thick soup, you can do it by two ways. You can reduce it, make it thicker. If that's the case, you want to add your chicken base at the end because it might be too salty. Or you could even mix up a little bit of cornstarch and water, and it'll keep it low calorie. Now, if you have a real thick soup, go ahead and put the sour cream in the center. But if you have a thin soup, it's just going to go to the bottom. So use the side of your bowl. And then you have a French style, I guess you could say, tomato basil soup. You guys want to try some? I got a little extra. This is cod and rock cod, and I use rock cod a lot in Las Vegas because it is one of the fish that comes from the Pacific Coast, so it can get here fresh, and you always want to smell your fish, especially in the butcher shop or at Albertsons or whatever. Just ask them to let you take a whiff of it. You smell anything but the ocean, don't get it. And also, they often when they cut up, that you'll just feel around and you'll feel bones. And if you feel bones, a lot of people just really hate bones. I've noticed that. They can't stand getting big old bone in their fish. So what you do is feel it and see how it's, where it's running. What you're going to do is take your knife. Nice and clean. Take your knife, and all the bones are going this way. So if we draw our hand out, we almost get a line. So what you want to do is do a slice to the side of the bones, and do a slice on the other side of the bones, and usually they'll all be in one slice. Just check it one more time. Oh, I missed one. Take that one out. Now you can either chuck this, or you can make a fish stock. I never make fish stock, but if you feel like making fish stock, make fish stock. And definitely throw out the trash tonight, because it's not going to smell good in the morning. And the marinade I do for this, or I guess you could call it marinade. Marinades are really go back in time to when we didn't have any refrigeration. and they were used as a way of preserving your food, so it wouldn't go bad. And that's why most marinades have oil in them. And oil doesn't soak into meat. It's for an oxygen barrier. So the idea would be is you take a tub or a bowl or whatever, and you put your meat in there, and you put your marinade in. It's usually a sugar, vinegar, something like that would almost cure the meat, and then the oil would float to the top, and that keeps the oxygen out of your mixture. But a lot of marinades still call for oil, so you can leave the oil out if you want, or don't use the refrigerator. It's up to you. But the mixture I do is cilantro and honey and a little bit of soy sauce and garlic. And you can let the fish go for even 5 or 6 hours in that. The honey and the soy probably won't take out too much of the moisture, but it's a marinade that goes great with almost any white fish. My favorite is sea bass, but a lot of chefs are not cooking with sea bass these days because sea bass has been somewhat fished out, and so there's an anti-sea bass campaign going on now. That's why you'll see it a lot less in the restaurants. But there's some other fish that are as worthy as sea bass. I just love the richness of it. I guess that's why it's fished out. Everybody else feels the same way. So you're just checking for every little bone. Sometimes there's a little bit of, it feels like a bone, but it's not. It's almost like fish gristle, so you don't have to worry about that. Put this back on here. One hint you can do is put this in a Ziploc, and then add ingredients, and then every few minutes or every 20 minutes open up the fridge and go squish it around, and that'll make sure that everything gets covered. And one way you can mince your garlic is actually to use the backside of your knife, and you're almost like shaving it. Well, it does a good job of crushing. If I do this, I'm just going to get really thin slices. If I do it on this side, I'm actually crushing the garlic. And I'll still slice it up a little bit. But the garlic presses drive me nuts because I spend more time cleaning it out than the time it saves me to do it this way. So I really avoid the bottled crushed garlic. I think it's the preservative they put in it. It's not any good in my opinion. Right on there. I'm gonna massage my fish in a minute. If you're avoiding sugar, you could definitely use some Splenda. It would taste just as good. We're just looking for sweetness. This is honey, but say you're avoiding sugar, you can definitely use Splenda. I'm diabetic, so I tend to cook without much sugar. And Splenda is one of those sweeteners that the heat doesn't seem to mess up. Don't use NutraSweet though. NutraSweet and heat don't work well together. Okay, we'll let that sit for a few minutes and then get our vegetables going and our rice. Rice, short grain rice like this. I usually do a short grain or long grain. I usually do my knuckle trick. And so if you do this much rice, this much water, usually does it. So yeah, awesome. That's your measuring stick. I don't have any measuring cups in my house, so this works pretty well. I like jasmine rice because it smells like popcorn while it's cooking. Everybody goes, where's the popcorn? So you just do the water up to your knuckle. And I'm going to let this, generally you can cover it and that's almost perfect. It might be a little dry. I'll know at the end. I might add a little bit more water. But if you cover it, you're pretty much going to get pretty good rice. The only rice that's really, well, brown rice takes a lot longer because it's got, the whole hull and the kernel and everything on it. And it's much better for you. And you can get almost every rice in brown rice form. So you have a choice. But also cow roast rice like you use for sushi, you have to take a few more steps and be real accurate in the amount of water you use because we're looking for that perfect kernel that's sticky but not glue or mushy. So really the difference between good sushi and bad sushi. If you go into making sushi rice, definitely read the instructions on how to make your sushi rice. It's all the difference in the world. Whether people are going to say you're any good at it or not. Get the vegetables going. Now, eggplant is one of those things that just sucks up the oil. And so it does take a fair amount of oil for this dish. And I may even add some more. These are Japanese eggplants. And I particularly like the color of them. If you slice them fairly thin, they'll cook faster. And we really want to brown these. We want to get like a caramelization on them. And we're going to get these going first because they're going to take the longest to cook. And then we'll add in some mushrooms and some bell peppers. And then I add the white corn in almost at the very end. I almost want it raw. I like the white corn if it's in season. I can eat it right off the cob myself. Actually, one of these guys might be enough. We'll use the other one for garnish. A little big for garnish. I got my back pan on and my front pan off. And bell pepper. This is sort of my trick. I instead of trying to clean it, I just follow the bell pepper down and usually leave the pith behind. And if you wanted to roast your bell pepper, you could, especially on this, a stove like this, and run it under cold water, take all the carbon, the burnt stuff off. And what that'll do is it changes the flavor of the pepper, gives it a nice roasted flavor. Now, ideally, you want to throw your eggplant into a pan that's hot. So you guys can see that's really soaking up the oil. It'll come to heat pretty quick. It's a good stove. Now your rice, bring it to a boil, and then lower the temperature. Otherwise, it's going to boil over pretty quick. Set those aside, and we'll slice some mushrooms. I think I'm going to quarter these. I like to use the stems. A lot of people throw the stems away, but if you cook them through, they're pretty tasty. Waste not, wet not. Whether you use the stems depends on the price of the dish. If it's a $4 dish, you get the stems. If it's a $20 dish, no stems. Slice some of this up for our fish. One thing I forgot to say is when you get sesame seed oil for this dish, make sure it's the roasted sesame seed oil. The The regular sesame seed oil is just oil. And it's not until you roast the sesame seeds that you get that real aromatic flavor. So nice. One thing is the oil will start to come back out of these in a few minutes as they brown. And I should add some garlic to this, but I think we got enough on the fish, so we'll pick it up. You guys want to see a flame? It's not going to add much flavor, but we'll definitely give it a flame. Okay, back to massaging our fish. Like I said, you can put this in a Ziploc, and I just want to make sure that the flavor's all around the fish. But wait till you taste this. This is a great way to flavor your fish. And you can do this chicken or pork chop or something like that. It's just a great flavor. It just works well together. Can you smell the rice yet? Does it smell like popcorn in here? Now my fish I always cook really quickly. I like to cook fish quickly. And so really you want your pan nice and hot. And if you don't have a stove this size, you know, this is cold fish, and when any meat or anything like that hits the pan, it brings down the temperature of the pan. So if you want to sear something, you have two choices. You sear it in batches, or get a couple of pans going is the best way. So because it really makes a difference how much heat's in the pan and how it can sustain that heat. Now this is oyster sauce, and this is sriracha sauce. And I use a lot of sriracha, and the reason I like it so much is it's a tomato garlic base. It's hot, but it's not. It doesn't have any vinegar in it, like Tabasco and so many hot sauces have a lot of vinegar in them. So you put something with vinegar in it, it's going to have a vinegary flavor, and that's not necessarily what you want in your vegetables. And the oyster sauce is sort of salty, so you don't want to. Mr. Hines taught me that. He said he made more money on the ketchup that people threw away than the ketchup people used. So I'm going to turn those down. I just want those can sit now. The eggplant's at the texture I want it. And a little bit of, we got some oil on the fish, but I'm just going to add a little bit more to the pan. And try to set your meat down into the pans. It'll avoid the splashing and I can see the rice it's going to be cooked properly, so now I'm worried about is just getting off the moisture so that it's not too soupy. But it looks pretty cooked. You can also add your pineapple to it now. You can throw peanuts in there, you can throw cilantro. I throw all sorts of stuff in the rice. It's just another, another dimension, another flavors. The soy sauce and the honey gives a nice caramelized color to it. Now, this would be an ideal time to put a lid on it. Keep it and then bring down the heat, let it sit there and it'll steam. When you put a lid on something, you get heat from the bottom and the top, so it's almost like a little oven. So it's a good way to add the heat without drying out your fish. And two things happen to fish is we overcook it, it gets dry, or it gets tough, and neither one's desirable. I wanted to be an actor. And my parents said, what are you going to do? I told my parents I wanted to be an actor, and they said, what are you going to do while you're unemployed? And I said, what do you mean? And they said, didn't you know most actors are unemployed? And I went, well, I'm not going to be. So I went to culinary school and just kept on cooking. Nice thing about this fish is it's so moist and there's so much flavor, you really don't need a sauce. Now as the fish gets cooked, it starts to flake. You can see right, you guys on the camera on that? Just there. I mean, I can tell you right now that that particular piece of fish is just right for eating. And when we got it, some red snapper, some sauteed eggplant with some other vegetables, and some jasmine rice. You guys want to try some? Okay. Started with, I got some chicken tenders here. And chicken tenders are part of the breast meat. And they peel off the breast real easy, but it has a little bit of tendon in each one. So I usually like to go in and you can just sort of fold the chicken over and cut that piece out. You could use whole chicken breasts as well. It's not going to make that big a difference. But if you do use the whole chicken breast and it's got the tender on it, you want to peel the tender off because the tender it's not fully attached to the meat, and it almost makes like a heat barrier between the chicken tender part and the chicken meat, and it takes forever to cook. So what you end up doing is drying out your meat, trying to cook this space in between. So it's better just to peel it off and cook it separately, or you can actually sort of fold it out in some cases. But for yield is what we have left. Chicken tenders are a pretty good way to go because there's usually very little fat on there, very little, the breast cartilage or anything like that. And seasoning wise, I'm always, I always grab different seasonings in the stores, and often I'm like, wow, that stuff's really good. And over at the market near me, they've got this Polo seasoning, and I use it all the time. It's good stuff. And I also don't, when I do chicken breasts, I don't usually put any oil in the pan. There's a little bit of oil in the chicken. You'll see in a minute. You don't need to do it. This is hold on. Chicken spice. I'll pass it around later. Starts with an S.
Have you ever tried the chicken paste from Sam's?
No, the chicken base for cooking? Yeah, great stuff. Yeah. So you put your seasoning part down, then you can season the other side while it's in the pan. Now, a lot of times in cooking we talk about transfer of, things like salmonella. And what you have to be worried about is not necessarily the salmonella that's on this, and if I chop the asparagus, and if I served it raw in, say, a relish tray or whatever, that's where you got to worry about it. If you're going to cook the asparagus, you're going to kill the salmonella on it as well. So usually when we're worried about transferring, something that's going to hurt somebody to another dish, it's usually the way it happens. It does happen occasionally with undercooked chicken, but more often than not, it was some bozo who made potato salad and threw potatoes right into all that mayonnaise and chopped eggs and get someone really sick. So that's one thing to worry about. Set these aside. And what you want to do with the spaghetti squash is I put it in the microwave, and I just keep turning on about 3-minute intervals, and when it starts to get soft on the side, then I'll yank it. And then you just want to take out the seeds first. And as you dig into the squash, the spaghetti part just comes off the side. You could also bake it in the oven if you were doing something else in the oven anyway. You just wanted to use the heat, but the microwave is pretty convenient. I use the microwave for a lot, but that's one thing that I do use it for. If I scraped a little longer, I'd get some more out of there, but. And if you wanted to, you could separate the seeds and toast those up. Even the best way to do toasted pumpkin seeds, you would do a salt water solution, and you put them in a pan, and when the salt evaporates, then they're nicely covered with salt or other seasonings. That should be enough for now. And I'm going to add a little butter to this. Stuff in that drawer. You see, it still browns without any oil in there. So if you're looking at counting calories, you really don't need to saute your chicken as long as you're using a Teflon pan. If you're just using a steel pan, that's probably going to stick like glue. And once again, I'm gonna, for my salt, to give some richness to the spaghetti squash, I'm gonna add some chicken base to this. There's my salt. It's a little chunky, so it's better to, otherwise you're going to end up with a big clump. It won't be too salty. And the chicken's actually almost cooked through, but I don't want it to dry out, and I still want to do some vegetables. So I'm going to set it off to the side for a minute, and then we'll add it back in, finish cooking them off. That way it won't dry out. And we can pick up these flavors. We're talking about the caramelization on the bottom pan. One trick is putting a wet towel under your cutting board, not asparagus. Should stay still. Get the drippings off that, and the real thin asparagus is not as big a deal, but the thick asparagus down near the bottom, it gets woody. So what we generally do is where it snaps is generally where the woodiness ends, or you can just take a good guess. And the big asparagus, big asparagus is usually $3.50 a pound, and we usually throw away about a third or fourth of it. If you got the time, you can peel that last bit, and with the peeler. And the woodiness is only on the outside. The center will be nice and tender. Turn the heat up on that. I'm going to just do some mushrooms thinly sliced. If you're using mushrooms for a cream sauce, and you want the cream sauce to stay nice and white, make sure your mushrooms are like this, not like this, because as they open up, it'll darken your sauce as they get older. And I got this fresh white corn, so I'm going to add that in as well. And I usually just slice it right into the few corn hairs there. Hold on a second. I hate that stuff. Yeah. Generally what ends up in my dishes is what's on sale. So I go to the store and I walk around, and there's always some meat on sale, there's always some vegetables and fruit on sale, so that's what I make dinner out of. Keeps your food costs way low. turned off the wrong one. And that's mostly what we're going to put in that. I'm going to put the chicken back in and just push the vegetables to the side. Usually you can tell how well cooked meat is through by its squishiness. We often use this part of our hand. That's usually rare. That's medium, some resistance. You full fist, you're pretty much well done. Chicken, you want well done. Pork, it's getting more and more customary, for restaurants to do pork, medium rare. And the reason people are sort of like this is we used to have trichinosis. It was very common in the United States, but it's been a long time since anybody's gotten trichinosis. So you could have pork tartare. I haven't seen it in a restaurant yet, but I don't know who's going to be daring enough to do it. That's raw. But you clinically could. It won't be me. How many of you would try pork tartare? That's funny, but it's safe. I mean, but our minds, we think that way. Yeah, absolutely. Okey-doke. Usually when I put any dairy, anything in, put your nose in it, because you put it in there, you've just ruined everything. You got to throw it all out. So we're doing a cream sauce, and also cream is almost, I think it's no carbs, if I remember correctly. Carbs, 0. Yeah, so we're still almost no carbohydrates here. You got some in the vegetables, but if you're diabetic or you're worrying about your weight, one of the best things you can do is eat carbs that take a long time to digest. And that way your blood sugars stay low and your body doesn't squirt a bunch of insulin in. You're not craving more carbs. One of the problems we have now is we have all these refined grains and sugars and everything. They go into our system so fast, our body figures there must be a whole bunch more right behind it, so it squirts in extra insulin, and that creates the hunger. That's usually why you eat a half a bag of potatoes chips and you want the other half about an hour later. So we got our faux spaghetti. Oops. Now this is really, you've got all your vegetables, you got your protein, you got your carbs, and they're good carbs that are in there. And a portion that size is going to fill you up. And sauce, we're looking for, see that texture? We want it to stick to the spoon but not be gummy. And that's what we're looking for right there. So all spaghetti squash gets some. And then garni. Plus some Parmesan cheese. And in the restaurant business, we always make sure our drips are cleaned up. And you also would prefer a nice warm plate, especially pasta. Pasta seems to cool off pretty quick. And so there we go. Got a chicken spaghetti squash. You guys want to try some?
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna add a little more cream to this so I can